What if I told you that the moment life feels meaningless is not the end of your story, but the beginning of something you have not yet allowed yourself to understand? That the emptiness you feel, the hollow ache that settles into your chest when you wake in the morning or when you lie awake at night, is not evidence of your failure or proof that something inside you is fundamentally broken? What if that feeling, that terrible weightlessness, is actually a signal, a message from a part of yourself that has been trying to reach you for longer than you can remember? There are people who move through the world and never stop long enough to feel this. They fill their days with noise and motion, with tasks and distractions, with the voices of others and the demands of a life that never pauses to ask whether any of it matters. And perhaps for them, that works. Perhaps they never encounter the question. But you are not one of those people. You have stopped. You have felt the ground give way beneath the structures you built, the routines you maintained, the roles you performed. And now you are standing in a place that feels like nothing, like absence, like the end of meaning itself. But I want to suggest to you, gently, that this place you are standing in is not an ending. It is a threshold. It is the place where the old meanings have dissolved. Yes, but it is also the place where something new can begin to take shape if you are willing to stay with it, if you are willing to stop running from the emptiness and instead turn toward it with curiosity, with patience, with a kind of reverence for what it might be trying to show you. Carl Jung spoke often about the importance of the inner life, about the necessity of turning inward, of descending into the depths of oneself rather than always reaching outward for answers. He understood that there are moments in a life when everything that once held meaning begins to crumble, when the persona we have constructed, the mask we wear in the world, no longer fits, no longer feels true. And in those moments, we are faced with a choice. We can try to rebuild the same structures, to force ourselves back into the same roles, to numb the feeling with distraction or denial. Or we can allow ourselves to enter what Jung called the process of individuation, the slow, often painful journey toward becoming who we actually are, beneath all the layers of expectation and conditioning and fear. When life feels meaningless, it is often because we have been living according to meanings that were never truly ours. We have been following scripts written by others, by our families, by our culture, by the voices that told us what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, what a good life is supposed to contain. And for a while, perhaps, we believed those scripts. We tried to live them. We worked hard. We pursued the goals we were told to pursue. We built the life we were told would bring fulfillment. But somewhere along the way, something inside us began to resist. A quiet voice, barely audible at first, began to whisper that this is not it, that this is not enough, that there is something missing, something essential, something true. And when that voice grows loud enough, when we can no longer ignore it, the structures we built begin to lose their solidity. The job that once felt important starts to feel hollow. The relationships that once felt sustaining start to feel draining. The activities that once brought pleasure start to feel empty. And we are left with this terrible feeling of meaninglessness, this sense that nothing matters, that we have been walking in circles, that we have wasted our time, that we have lost our way. But what if you have not lost your way? What if instead you are finally beginning to find it? What if the meaninglessness you feel is not the absence of meaning, but the clearing away of false meanings, the dismantling of a life that was never truly aligned with who you are? What if this emptiness is not a void, but a space that has been created so that something new, something more authentic, something more deeply true can begin to emerge? This is not easy to accept. The feeling of meaninglessness is one of the most painful experiences a human being can endure. It is more painful than physical suffering, more painful than loss, because it strikes at the very core of our existence. It makes us question why we are here, whether our lives have any purpose, whether anything we do or feel or think actually matters. It is the kind of pain that can drive people to despair, to numbness, to the edge of themselves. And so I do not want to minimize it. I do not want to speak to you as if this is simple, as if you can just reframe your perspective and the pain will disappear. That is not how this works. That is not what I am offering you. What I am offering you is a different way of understanding what is happening, not to make the pain go away, but to help you see that the pain has a purpose, that it is not random, that it is not punishment, that it is not evidence of your failure. The pain is a signal. It is your psyche's way of telling you that something needs to change, that you cannot continue living the way you have been living, that the old structures are no longer serving you, that you're being called towards something deeper, something more real, something more aligned with the truth of who you are. Jung believed that the psyche is always moving toward wholeness, toward integration, toward the realization of the self. But this movement is not linear. It is not smooth. It often requires us to descend into darkness, to face what we have been avoiding, to let go of what we have been clinging to. He called this the process of individuation, and he understood it as the central task of the second half of life. Though it can begin at any age, whenever we are ready, whenever life forces us to confront the question of meaning. When you feel that life is meaningless, it is often because you've been living in what Jung called the persona, the social mask, the version of yourself that you present to the world. The persona is necessary. We all need it. It allows us to function in society, to fulfill our roles, to interact with others. But the persona is not the self. It is a construction, a performance, a way of being that is shaped by external expectations rather than internal truth. And when we live too long in the persona, when we identify too completely with it, we lose touch with the deeper parts of ourselves, the parts that hold our actual values, our actual desires, our actual sense of purpose. The feeling of meaninglessness is the self crying out from beneath the persona. It is the true you, the one who has been buried under layers of should and must and supposed to, trying to get your attention. It is saying, this is not who you are. This is not what you are here for. This is not the life you are meant to be living. And the only way forward, the only way to restore meaning, is to begin the slow, difficult work of peeling back those layers, of questioning the assumptions you have been living by, of discovering what actually matters to you, not to your parents, not to your culture, not to the voices in your head that sound like authority, but to you, to the quiet, often overlooked part of yourself that knows, that has always known what is true. This is why the feeling of meaninglessness is a signal, not an ending. It is the beginning of a process, the start of a journey inward. And like all journeys, it requires courage. It requires you to be willing to let go of certainty, to sit with discomfort, to face the unknown. Because when you begin to question the meanings you have been living by, when you begin to dismantle the persona, you enter a period of not knowing. You enter a liminal space, a space between what was and what will be. And in that space, there's no map, no clear path, no guarantee of where you will end up. This is frightening. Our minds crave certainty. They crave structure. They want to know what comes next, what the plan is, what the outcome will be. And when we cannot provide that, when we are suspended in uncertainty, the mind often panics. It tells us we are lost, that we are failing, that we should go back to what we knew, even if what we knew was making us miserable. The mind prefers the familiar suffering to the unknown possibility. This is not a flaw in you. This is how the mind works. It is trying to protect you. It is trying to keep you safe. But safety is not the same as aliveness. Safety is not the same as meaning. To move through this period, to allow the process of individuation to unfold, you have to learn to tolerate not knowing. You have to learn to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty, to trust that even though you cannot see the way forward, there is a way That even though you do not yet know what your life is meant to be, the answer is forming inside you, slowly, quietly, in the depths of your psyche. This requires a kind of faith, not in a religious sense necessarily, though it can be that, but faith in the process itself. Faith that your psyche knows what it is doing, that it is guiding you towards something, even when it feels like you're falling apart. Jung spoke of the unconscious as a source of wisdom, a reservoir of insight and guidance that is always available to us if we learn to listen. But we have been taught to ignore the unconscious, to dismiss it, to privilege the rational mind, the conscious ego, the part of us that thinks it is in control. And so when the unconscious begins to speak, when it sends us dreams, symbols, feelings, intuitions, we often do not recognize them as messages. We dismiss them as random, as meaningless, as noise. But they are not noise. They are the language of the self, the way the deeper parts of us communicate, the way we are guided toward wholeness. When life feels meaningless, it is often because we have lost touch with this inner guidance. We have been living entirely in the conscious mind, in the realm of logic and planning and external achievement, and we have forgotten how to listen to the quieter, more subtle voice of the unconscious. And so the unconscious, in its wisdom, begins to withdraw its energy from the external world. It stops investing in the roles and goals and structures that no longer serve us. It creates the feeling of meaninglessness, the sense that nothing matters, as a way of getting our attention, as a way of saying, stop, turn around, look inward. There is something here you need to see. This is not punishment. This is not failure. This is the psyche's way of redirecting you, of pulling you back from a path that was leading you away from yourself. And if you can begin to see it this way, if you can begin to understand that the meaninglessness is not the problem but the solution, not the disease but the cure, then you can start to work with it rather than against it. You can start to ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What am I being called to let go of? What am I being called to turn toward? These are not easy questions. They do not have quick answers. They require you to sit with yourself, to spend time in solitude, to create space for reflection and introspection. They require you to slow down, to stop filling every moment with distraction, to allow the silence to be there, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it feels unbearable. Because it is in the silence, in the stillness, that the deeper truths begin to emerge. It is in the space between the noise that you can finally hear the voice of the self, the one that has been drowned out by all the other voices, the one that knows what you actually need, what you actually want, what you are actually here for. Many people resist this. They resist the silence because they are afraid of what they will find there. They are afraid that if they stop moving, if they stop achieving, if they stop performing, they will discover that there is nothing inside them, that they are empty, that they are worthless. But this fear is based on a misunderstanding. The emptiness you feel is not the emptiness of nothing. It is the emptiness of space, of potential, of possibility. It is the fertile void, the place where creation begins. And what you will find, if you are willing to stay with it, is not nothing, but everything. You will find the parts of yourself that have been waiting quietly, patiently, for you to return. You will find the desires you buried, the dreams you abandoned, the truths you were too afraid to speak. You will find yourself. This process takes time. It cannot be rushed. Our culture wants everything to be fast, efficient, productive. We want to fix problems quickly, to move on, to get back to normal. But there is no quick fix for meaninglessness. There is no shortcut through the dark night of the soul. This is a journey that unfolds at its own pace, and the only way through is through. You have to be willing to stay with the discomfort, to sit with the questions, to let the process unfold without trying to control it, without trying to force an outcome. Jung understood that the process of individuation is lifelong. It is not something you complete, and then move on from. It is the ongoing work of becoming more fully yourself, of integrating the unconscious, of bringing the shadow into the light, of reconciling the opposites within you. And it is never finished. There is always more to discover, more to integrate, more to understand. But this is not a burden. This is the richness of being human. This is what gives life its depth, its texture, its meaning. When you begin to engage with this process, when you begin to turn inward and listen to the voice of the self, you may find that your external life begins to change. You may find that you no longer want to do the things you used to do, that you no longer want to be around the people you used to be around, that you no longer want to pursue the goals you used to pursue. This can be disorienting. It can feel like you're losing yourself, like you are becoming someone you do not recognize. But you are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself. You are shedding the layers of the persona, the false self, and you are beginning to live from a place of authenticity, of truth, of alignment with who you actually are. This may mean making difficult choices. It may mean leaving a job that no longer fits, ending a relationship that no longer serves you, walking away from a path that you have invested years in, but that is no longer taking you where you need to go. These choices are not easy. They come with grief, with loss, with uncertainty, but they also come with a sense of relief, a sense of rightness, a sense that you are finally moving in the direction you're meant to be moving. Not everyone will understand this. In fact, most people will not. They will see you pulling back, withdrawing, changing, and they will interpret it through their own lens, through their own fears and projections. They will say you are being selfish, that you are running away, that you're having a crisis, that you need to get back to normal. But normal, for you, was the problem. Normal was what was making you feel like life had no meaning. And so their concern, though perhaps well-intentioned, is not what you need. What you need is space, permission, support for the journey you are on, even if others cannot understand it, even if it does not make sense to them. This is where solitude becomes essential. Not isolation, not withdrawal from all connection, but solitude, the intentional choice to spend time alone, to be with yourself, to listen to yourself, to honor the inner work you are doing. Solitude is where the self can speak without interference, where you can hear your own voice without the noise of others drowning it out. And for people who are going through this process, solitude is not loneliness. It is restoration. It is nourishment. It is the place where you remember who you are. There is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is the feeling of disconnection, of isolation, of being cut off from others and from yourself. But aloneness, solitude, is the experience of being with yourself fully, without distraction, without performance, without the need to be anything other than what you are. And in that space, you can begin to build a relationship with yourself, a relationship based on honesty, on acceptance, on compassion. You can begin to see yourself clearly, not through the distorted lens of others' expectations, but as you actually are, with all your complexity, your contradictions, your depth. This relationship with yourself is the foundation of meaning, because meaning is not something that exists out there in the world waiting for you to find it. Meaning is something you create, something you generate from within, based on your values, your passions, your sense of purpose. And you cannot create meaning if you do not know yourself. If you are living according to someone else's script, if you are disconnected from the deeper parts of who you are. The feeling of meaninglessness is the signal that this disconnection has gone on too long, that you have drifted too far from yourself, that it is time to come home. Coming home to yourself is not a single moment. It is a gradual process, a slow unfolding, a series of small recognitions and adjustments and realizations. It is noticing what makes you feel alive and what drains you. It is paying attention to what you are drawn to and what repels you. It is honoring your needs, your rhythms, your preferences, even when they do not match what others expect or approve of. It is learning to trust your own inner knowing, your own sense of what is right for you, even when it conflicts with external advice or conventional wisdom. This requires a kind of courage that is not often talked about. It is not the courage of grand gestures or heroic acts. It is the quiet courage of being yourself, of standing in your truth, of saying no to what does not serve you and yes to what does, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is unpopular, even when it costs you something. It is the courage to disappoint others, to let go of their approval, to accept that you cannot be everything to everyone, that you cannot live your life for others, that you must, ultimately, live it for yourself. This does not mean becoming selfish or uncaring. It does not mean abandoning responsibility or connection. It means recognizing that you cannot give from an empty well, that you cannot be present for others if you are not present for yourself, that you cannot offer authentic love and support if you're living a life that is inauthentic, that is out of alignment with who you are. The most generous thing you can do for yourself and for others is to become who you actually are, to live from a place of integrity and truth, to stop pretending, stop performing, stop trying to be what you're not. When you do this, when you begin to live more authentically, you may find that some people fall away. Relationships that were based on the persona, on the false self, may not survive the emergence of the true self. This is painful. It is a loss, but it is also a necessary part of the process. Not everyone is meant to walk with you on this journey. Not everyone can meet you in the depth you are discovering, and that is okay. It does not mean there is something wrong with them or with you. It simply means that you are on different paths, that your growth is taking you in a different direction, that what you need now is different from what you needed before. And as some people fall away, others will come. You will begin to attract people who resonate with the truth of who you are, people who value depth, who appreciate authenticity, who are also on their own journey of becoming. These connections will feel different. They will not be based on performance or pretense. They will be based on mutual recognition, on the sense that you see each other, that you understand each other, that you can be yourselves together without fear of judgment or rejection. These are the connections that sustain, that nourish, that remind you that you are not alone, that there are others who feel what you feel, who see what you see, who are also finding their way through the darkness towards something more real. But even with these connections, even with the support of others who understand, the journey is ultimately yours. No one can do this work for you. No one can tell you what your life is meant to be, what your purpose is, what will bring you meaning. These are questions only you can answer, and you can only answer them by turning inward, by listening deeply, by paying attention to what moves you, what calls to you, what feels true. This is not a cognitive process. It is not something you can figure out with logic or analysis. It is a felt sense, an intuitive knowing, a recognition that arises from the depths of your being when you are quiet enough, still enough, open enough to receive it. Jung spoke of the self with a capital S, the archetype of wholeness, the organizing principle of the psyche that guides us toward integration and realization. The self is not the ego, the conscious I that we identify with in our daily lives. The self is something larger, something deeper, something that encompasses both the conscious and the unconscious, both the light and the shadow, both what we know about ourselves and what we have yet to discover. And the process of individuation is the process of aligning the ego with the self, of allowing the conscious personality to be guided by the deeper wisdom of the unconscious, of becoming a vessel for the self to express itself in the world. This sounds abstract, perhaps, but it is actually very practical. It means learning to listen to your dreams, to pay attention to your fantasies and daydreams, to notice the symbols and images that arise spontaneously in your mind. It means honoring your body, listening to its signals, respecting its needs. It means paying attention to synchronicities, to the meaningful coincidences that seem to guide you towards certain people, certain places, certain experiences. It means trusting that there is an intelligence at work in your life, an intelligence that is not separate from you, but is the deepest part of you, the part that knows where you need to go, what you need to learn, who you need to become. When life feels meaningless, it is often because we have lost touch with this intelligence. We have been living entirely in the ego, in the conscious mind, trying to control everything, to plan everything, to make everything happen through force of will. And the ego, for all its strengths, is limited. It cannot see the whole picture. It cannot access the wisdom of the unconscious. It gets stuck in patterns, in habits, in ways of thinking that no longer serve. And when the ego is in charge, when it is cut off from the self, life becomes flat, mechanical, empty. We go through the motions, but we do not feel alive. We achieve things, but they do not bring satisfaction. We connect with others, but we do not feel truly seen or known. The feeling of meaninglessness is the self's way of saying, let go, surrender, stop trying to control everything. Trust me, trust the process, trust that there is a deeper intelligence guiding you, even when you cannot see it, even when it does not make sense. This is perhaps the hardest thing we are asked to do, to let go of control, to surrender to something we cannot fully understand, to trust in the unseen. But it is also the most liberating thing, because it frees us from the burden of having to figure everything out, of having to make everything happen, of having to be in charge all the time. It allows us to relax into the flow of our own becoming, to trust that we're being guided, that we're being held, that we're not alone in this. This does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean giving up or checking out or waiting for life to happen to you. It means becoming active in a different way, becoming responsive rather than controlling, becoming open rather than rigid, becoming willing to follow where you are led rather than insisting on going where you think you should go. It means paying attention, listening deeply, and then taking the small steps that feel right, that feel aligned, that feel true, even when you cannot see the whole path, even when you do not know where it is leading. This is the way through meaninglessness, not by forcing meaning, not by trying to convince yourself that things matter when they do not feel like they matter, but by opening yourself to the process of discovery, by allowing yourself to be guided by the deeper intelligence of the self, by trusting that meaning will emerge, not as something you impose from the outside, but as something that arises from within, as you become more fully yourself, as you align more deeply with your own truth. And meaning, when it comes, does not look the way you might expect. It is not grand or dramatic. It is not a single purpose that explains everything, that makes everything make sense. Meaning is quieter than that. It is the sense that what you are doing matters, not because it is important in some objective, universal sense, but because it is important to you, because it is an expression of who you are, because it is aligned with your values, your passions, your sense of what is good and true and beautiful. Meaning is the feeling of being engaged with life, of being present, of caring about something, of feeling connected to something larger than yourself, whether that is a community, a cause, a creative work, a relationship, or simply the ongoing process of your own becoming. You do not need to have it all figured out. You do not need to know your life's purpose or have a 5-year plan or be certain about where you are going. You just need to be willing to stay with the process, to keep listening, to keep paying attention, to keep taking the next small step that feels true. And over time, as you do this, as you continue to honor your own inner guidance, as you continue to align your life more closely with who you actually are, the feeling of meaninglessness will begin to fade. Not because you have found the answer, but because you have stopped asking the question in the old way. You have stopped looking for meaning out there, in the world, in achievements and accomplishments and external validation. And you have started creating meaning from within, from the simple act of being yourself, of living authentically, of honoring what is true for you. This is not a destination. This is a way of being. This is the ongoing work of individuation, of becoming, of growing into the fullness of who you are. And it is never finished. There will be times when you feel lost again, when the old feelings of meaninglessness return, when you question everything all over again. This is normal. This is part of the process. The path is not linear. It spirals. You return to the same questions, the same challenges, but each time you return, you bring more awareness, more understanding, more integration. Each time, you go a little deeper. Each time, you discover something new about yourself, something you could not have seen before. And this is the gift of meaninglessness, if you can receive it. It is the invitation to go deeper, to stop living on the surface, to stop accepting the easy answers and the comfortable lies. It is the call to become more real, more authentic, more yourself. It is the signal that you are ready for something more, something deeper, something truer. And if you can hear that signal, if you can respond to it with courage and curiosity and compassion for yourself, then what feels like an ending can become a beginning. And what feels like emptiness can become the space where your true life, the life you are meant to live, finally begins to take shape. You are not broken. You're not lost. You are in the middle of a process, a sacred process, a process that is as old as humanity itself, the process of becoming who you are meant to be. And the feeling of meaninglessness is not your enemy. It is your guide. It is showing you where you have been living out of alignment, where you have been betraying yourself, where you have been giving your energy to things that do not truly matter to you. And now you have the opportunity to change that, to reclaim your energy, to redirect your life, to begin living from a place of truth and authenticity and deep inner knowing. This is not easy, but is worth it, because on the other side of meaninglessness is not just meaning, but aliveness, presence, depth, connection, the felt sense that you're living your own life, not someone else's script, that you are being yourself, not performing a role, that you matter, not because of what you achieve or how you appear, but simply because you are here, because you are real, because you are willing to show up, to be present, to engage with the mystery of your own existence. So if you're feeling that life is meaningless, if you're standing in that empty place, that threshold, that space between what was and what will be, I want you to know that you are exactly where you need to be. This is not a mistake. This is not a failure. This is the beginning. This is the signal. This is the invitation. And if you can be brave enough to accept it, to turn inward, to listen deeply, to trust the process, then you will find what you are looking for. Not out there, but in here. Not in the future, but in the present. Not in becoming someone else, but in becoming more fully, more deeply, more authentically yourself.